Distinguished representatives, colleagues, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Buddhist Tzuchi Foundation's CSW parallel event, Women of Faith, Leading the Path to Climate Neutrality. My name is Steve Chu, and I'll be serving as your moderator for today's exciting panel. We've brought together a fantastic group of experts that will be showcasing stories, strategies, and solutions that empower women of faith as key agents of change as we go on this journey towards climate neutrality and investigate a better relationship with our planet. With me today, I have Venerable Si De Chen, who serves as a monastic practitioner at the Jingsi Abode, which is the monastery of Dharma Master Zen Yen. She was ordained in 2013, and through the practice of spiritual cultivation, she works to find her pure nature within, benefit more sentient beings, learn from the spirit of the Buddha, and diligently walk on the Bodhisattva path. We also have Kekashan B. Khan, who serves as the head of civil society partnerships with the Division of Communication at UNICEF New York. B has also worked for UNFPA in Nepal prior to joining UNICEF, and also OCHA, WHO, and IOM in Pakistan. B is a Fulbright scholar and holds a master's degree from the Elliott School at George Washington University in Humanitarian Affairs and Conflict Resolution. Additionally, we have Dr. Karen Leslie Hernandez, who serves as the Program Officer in Partnerships and Interreligious Education at Religions for Peace. Dr. Hernandez has an extensive interfaith and interreligious expertise, alongside with her 2 theological master's degrees and her doctorate in spiritual renewal, contemplative practice, and strategic leadership. She's worked with the United Religions Initiative and has also served as an ambassador and presenter with the Parliament of the World's Religions. We also have Dr. Neha Pathak, who is a physician and medical journalist who is reporting on the health impacts of climate change. She completed her certificate in climate change and health communications from Yale School of Public Health and is a founding member of Georgia Clinicians for Climate Action and serves on the boards of Boomi Global and Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. Last but not least, we also have Deborah Boudreau, who serves as the CEO of Buddhist Tzuchi Foundation. She has over 33 years of experience working in major social movement projects related to charity, healthcare, education, and humanitarian aid, and serves as the current co-chair of the United Nations Multi-Faith Advisory Council, also is the secretary for the Global NGO Executive Committee of the United Nations Department of Global Communications, and serves as one of the board of trustees for the Parliament of the World's Religions. So with such a wonderful group of panelists, you know today's conversation is going to be fantastic, filled with wisdom and deep reflections. So to kick us off, let's welcome a statement from Venerable De Chen to reflect on this theme of women of faith leading towards the path of climate neutrality.
Distinguished guests, dear excellencies and friends, it is my pleasure to welcome you to Women of Faith, Leading the Path to Climate Neutrality. Thank you all for joining us today. This panel will highlight the efforts of women from different faith organizations in leading climate neutrality approaches and showcase the importance of interfaith and gender-equal collaboration and the process of climate action and environmental protection. Reflecting on this theme, I come back time and time again to a conversation between my teacher and founder of Buddhist Tzuchi Foundation, Dharma Master Zhen Yan, and a senior monastic who she greatly respected. Dharma Master Zhen Yan asked Dharma Master Xiu Dao, "What kind of woman is the most blessed?" The master replied, "The woman carrying a grocery basket is the most blessed." My teacher realized that it meant that the most blessed woman is one who is able to provide for her family. However, she couldn't help but wonder if that's all a woman can strive for. Instead of one family, why not carrying a grocery basket for the whole world? It was with this aspiration that my teacher, Dharma Master Zheng Yan established Tzu Chi in 1966 with 30 housewives who each saved 50 cents, roughly 2 cents US dollars from their grocery money every day in order to help the poor. This movement slowly spread and grew and has now reached over 127 countries around the world. As we help people with a compassionate heart, we mustn't forget to show greater compassion to our earth. Faced with the gradual destruction of the environment we live in, the need for humanity to awaken is imminent. We can see on an international level, there have been many collaborations and agreements to reduce carbon emissions and pollution. But this is not enough. We need to take action across all levels and sectors, may it be individual or societal. After speaking a lecture over 30 years ago, as people started to applaud, Dharma Master Zheng Yan had the thought, what if everyone were to use their clapping hands to collect and sort recyclables? She made a call for individual action. First to answer her call was a young woman who started collecting recyclables from her neighbors and donated the proceeds to charity. More and more people were inspired to act, and today, Tzu Chi has over 8,000 recycling points throughout the world, with over 100,000 recycling volunteers who all use their hands to protect the earth for future generations. To me, this is an exceptional example of a female faith leader using her influence to make both concrete and significant impact toward the protection of our planet. Apart from advocating for others to live an environmental lifestyle, Dharma Master Zheng Yan herself also leads a life of great simplicity. In the morning, she prepares one basin of water for freshening up that she will then use for her hand washing that day. And the water she uses to wash up at night, she will reuse to flush the toilet the next day. She uses a piece of paper 4 times, writing first with a pencil, then with a blue pen, then a red pen, and finally with a brush. When monastics who follow her live by the same principle, we eat only plant-based food and turn the pills into fertilizer and enzyme that go back into the fields we use for our food production. We use electricity sparingly and pass the hot summer with the aid of only fans and use no air conditioning, except in our meeting rooms, the computer room, and in our food factory. When our clothing gets worn, we patch it to minimize the textile waste. We can see many examples of the Dharma Master's ingenuity. For example, tin canisters for cooking oil can be remade into dustpans, and fan nests are turned into racks for drying gloves or racks. We also put a lot of effort into using water as efficiently as possible. We use modified dishwashing throats, where the water used for the final rinse is reused for the next 2 last rinse, and the water for washing vegetables is reused to clean tools used in the fields or to wash the floor. We also have a rainwater catchment system and, of course, have installed solar panels on our roofs. Besides following the 5R lifestyle, refuse, reduce, reuse, repair, and recycle, Dharma Master Zheng Yan often emphasizes the importance of spiritual environmental protection. The underlying root of the threefold planetary crisis of climate change, loss of biodiversity, and rampant pollution is our human three poisons: greed, anger, and ignorance. Fortunately, there are antidotes to these poisons. Greed can be eliminated with gratitude. Anger can be mitigated with compassion, and ignorance can be expelled through self-reflection. Especially important in the practice of spiritual environmental protection is following a plant-based diet. By abstaining from supporting practices that cause suffering and death for living beings, we grow our compassion. By reducing demand for meat, we reduce the negative environmental effects of livestock farming, a main driver in all three aspects of the planetary crisis. And by eating a varied, nutritious, plant-based diet, we reduce our own risk from adverse health effects from meat, including cardiovascular disease, obesity, diabetes, and multiple types of cancer. Taken together, this makes a transformation of our food systems from meat-heavy to plant-centered and essential task moving forward. I would like to end by lifting up the incredible work done by our panelists, by members of the audience, and by the greater NGO and UN community in raising awareness of climate change and its causes. Your work to empower and protect women around the world, your efforts to bring all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals to fulfillment. Let us take courage and strength from our successes and not let ourselves be discouraged by temporary setbacks. I wish us all peace and blessings, and that each of us may continue to take good care of our hearts and minds. Moreover, let us continue to work in collaboration, promote, and take action for all sentient beings and our planet. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Venerable Daten, for the beautiful opening remarks, and particularly showcasing how we can model these actions to bring us towards a more climate neutral world while promoting a better relationship with each other and our planet. It's like Venerable Daten said, if we wish to have this sustainable future, we must increase ambition on a systemic level. We must ramp up our urgency within our own personal lives, shifting our systems, communities, and personal lives towards something that remarkably is more sustainable and healthier. And with this in mind, by doing this, we're able to create co-benefits that allow us to address climate change, safeguard the environment, and build resilience towards disaster. And so while we think about this holistic model, I'd like to also invite our other panelists to share other stories, solutions, and strategies that their organizations and faith traditions have been taking to empower women of faith to really begin to move us along this journey. So with that, I'll turn to B, who serves as the head of civil society advocacy at UNICEF New York, to explore with us what is the importance of engaging with women in faith in advancing the action for climate change, environmental protection, and disaster risk reduction.
Steve, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for this opportunity for UNICEF to be part of such a critical discussion. So huge thanks from us. Let me try and address this to the best of my ability. So at UNICEF, we have major tracks of programming that look at different aspects. So we look at gender justice, particularly aspects that impact girls' rights. We look at climate change, which is one of our top global advocacy priorities. And we look at mainstreaming the work with faith-based organizations and religious leaders, which has been a model of working across our key priorities, all the way from immunization, mental health, to the climate crisis. There is no doubt in my mind that women of faith are a critical component when we look at tackling the climate crisis. But their importance and the impact is perhaps not as widely understood outside our echo chambers as much as we would like to. And that is a consequence of a wider issue where women often have not been at the table in formulating climate policies and programs that impact their lives. They have not been included in decision-making processes, which reinforces pre-existing inequalities, resulting in less effective programs. In an unequal world, the impact of climate change is also unequal. I would like to stress three key points here, if I may. So at UNICEF, we acknowledge that climate change is having a disproportionate impact on women and girls. Women are less economically secure and have less access to natural resources to cope with the effects of climate change and to adapt to it. Secondly, faith-based organizations and religious leaders, both men and women, have been recognized as important players in protecting the environment and working towards climate justice. The agility of faith communities is crucial, especially at the local level and with other faith actors. And so the advancement of the climate agenda rests also on the advancement of the gender agenda and the mainstreaming of the impact of faith leaders in bringing together this positive change. It is increasingly being recognized that social protection can play a crucial role in responding to crises, including those related to climate. And this is where we think that the role of faith leaders, particularly women, come in. Third, given that there are very few organizations that deal holistically and solely within this nexus of faith, women, and climate together, I think it's important to highlight how critical partnerships between all of us, between UNICEF and faith-based organizations are, as there are expertise and technical knowledge to be gained from coming together and leveraging our collective knowledge, and then documenting that knowledge. So the role of women in faith is strengthened by mainstreaming the role of faith in advancing our key priorities. So UNICEF's flagship program, Faith for Positive Change for Children, Families, and Communities, FPCC for short, is a partnership between UNICEF, Religions for Peace, and the Joint Learning Initiative. And what we do is we bring together each organization's global networks and expertise and initiate the empowerment and basically empower religious leaders and faith communities across multiple regions to influence positive social and behavioral change. Our faith partners are doing incredible work. The World Council of Churches is a fellowship of over 350 churches from more than 120 countries, and they represent over 500 million Christians worldwide. In 2015, we started working in partnership with them to support the church's efforts for children and young people. So the church's Commitments to Children program was launched as a result, and where experts from the churches, children themselves, and child rights organizations came together and addressed the question, how can churches best use their influence to improve the lives of children? And the outcome here is an action plan with 3 commitments. There's child protection, child participation, but also climate justice, which is so critical to this generation. Islamic Relief Worldwide has a climate change policy, and it shapes how we respond to the climate change challenges. And they have the Islamic Declaration on Global Climate Change, which calls on Muslims to protect the environment. This has been a declaration that has been adopted by more than 60 Muslim leaders from around the world. Arigato International is a partner that convenes the Global Network for Religions for Children, and through their World Day activities, they allow children to reflect on the climate crisis and their role in creating adaptive solutions to climate change. This action engages with Christian and Muslim children through various trainings. It is through partnering with these incredible organizations that have networks of influential religious leaders, which UNICEF does not have, and taking into account the multiple facets of addressing gender inequality, that we can bring together more attention to the impact of women of faith. There is so much that is happening in this space. We need to document it and to create an evidence base that helps strengthen these interlinkages and create a more strategic structure of working better together. Back to you, Steve.
Brilliant. Thanks, B. I'm taking so many notes and I'm like, oh, there's so much, right? Like just pouring through that alone, if we think about what it means for UNICEF to be really lifting up this notion of the importance of mainstreaming religious leaders' work, I think that's fascinating. And in addition to that, recognizing that we don't have all the answers and the critical need for us to really explore partnerships as the main modality to ensure that we are able to address these multiple facets. And finally, coming to that last part, right, around M&E and thinking about the importance of really being able to measure our impact and ensure that the evidence for these things that we're speaking about are really at the forefront to ensure that policymakers and those at the table recognize that their solutions that they're designing are less effective unless women are at the table. So thank you for those beautiful reflections. I'll now pass it over to Neha to reflect on that same question, building off of B's reflections, and coming from your perspective, where has the importance of women in faith engaging in action for climate change, environmental protection, and DRR been for you?
First, thank you so much, Jitsuchi, for hosting this event, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today and participate and to represent Bhumi Global. My first reflection is it's very interesting. As a Hindu and a religious, spiritual person, I don't often identify with the term woman of faith or person of faith, because I really think that my religious tradition and all of our religious traditions engage us and compel us to action. So really, I think that we're coming together as communities, women, people who are really compelled to act based on our religious values. And those values, for all of us, really central to our, is sort of work as a North Star is for us ahimsa, which is the concept of nonviolence to ourselves and nonviolence to the environment around us. And I think that really sort of grounds the work that we are trying to do at Bhumi Global, but also all of the work that I do on a personal level. You mentioned that we can reflect on personal stories, so I can tell you that the only two things that don't give me imposter syndrome are thinking of myself as a primary care doc and as a mom. And all of the other work that I do outside of that are centered around those two ways of viewing myself. So I think there's no time that is more important than us to come together as people of action right now, when we're facing multiple threats from climate change, biodiversity loss, global pollution. All of these threats demand action. And as B mentioned, unfortunately, women are disproportionately affected by these threats. On the flip side, women have a disproportionate ability to create change. Whether we see that as a burden or a privilege, women are really the ones that often guide what the family unit is doing. Women are often the ones who bring their religious, spiritual worldview into the family unit and create lifestyle changes for the family. What we eat, where we play, where we go to perform our religious services, how we manage stress individually and as a family unit, really often come down to the woman of the household. So we are the great care coordinators of the family, and by extension, care coordinators within our communities. And so it's really an honor and a privilege to participate with a group like Bhumi Global that understands it's a central ethos that there is a divine energy in this universe. There's a divine energy within the natural world around us. We can view that as having male and female counterparts. And for us, we see the energy really flowing through the female divine energy in the movement of the mother goddesses as she flows through our sacred geography, in the planet Earth, the Mother Earth, constantly moving and giving us the food that we need, the shelter that we need, and meeting all of our needs. So it's really central to our ethos at Bhumi Global to consider the divine energy of the female, and we're looking internally within our structure to ensure that at the table we have gender balance in our internal structures with regard to our staff, with our board members, our advisory council, and then also externally in our programs that we are working to ensure that we have female leaders among Hindu groups that are also being encouraged to participate. So currently we're working to develop 10-year environmental action plans globally among Hindu organizations to ensure that female leaders are also empowered to participate and bring what we know they're doing in their homes to the larger community is of critical importance. I think that I'll sort of end there and just say that I personally also, as a physician, find it really fascinating that we have all of this ancient wisdom, 5,000 years that food is medicine, exercise is medicine, social connection is medicine. And we have moved, unfortunately, to this philosophy of we need a pill for every ill. And now, thankfully, we're seeing an awakening, even among the health professional community, that we cannot approach any of our problems individually or on a planetary level if we're really just sort of decomposing all of the parts of our body rather than putting it all together. So the reductive approach is just not something that's useful. So we're really looking as health professionals to engage in how we eat, how we use physical activity, how we connect with those around us and in our community to protect our mental and physical and spiritual health. So I will end there and thank you again for the opportunity.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Neha. And really thinking about what it means to address the symptom versus the root, right? If we're coming at it with a every pill for every ill, we're really just trying to like tackle that surface level issue. And you're rightly so pointing out that this ancient wisdom that we all carry, whether it's through our faith traditions or we have it inherently within us and our cultures and communities, is that unless we address this root problem, we won't be able to move forward. And I love that lifting up also that at the very onset, right, you spoke about how in creating these divisions, we end up trying to it becomes problematic, right? Because we're not trying to just address these issues in silos, but rather see how everything is deeply connected with everything else, right? And recognizing that connection, whether or not we think we have a role to play within this space, right? Talking about imposter syndrome, at the end of the day, here's the crisis. We must take action, right? So no matter who we are, it doesn't matter if we think we are the best suited for this role. At the end of the day, we have a place in this world and there's actions that we can take. And I love those reflections from you. I'll now move over to Karen to explore with the same question to us, the importance of engaging with women of faith as we work to advance climate action, environmental protection, and building resilience towards disasters.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. And I am in such wonderful company and appreciate already what has been said and all the wonderful wisdom that is part of this forum. So thank you again for allowing myself and Religions for Peace to be a part of this conversation. Religions for Peace is kind of known as the UN of religious institutions and faith communities, and it's composed of faith leaders that are elected and nominated to represent their institutions on the board. And the wonderful thing about Religions for Peace is that there is no single religious community that leads Religions for Peace. Instead, representatives from diverse religious traditions make up all of our structures and our leadership. And that includes our interreligious councils, which we have all over the world in over 90 countries. And I'll be speaking about a specific interreligious council in a few minutes. And in addition to those formal institutions, we have grassroots women of faith networks, and we have 50 plus years of multi-religious experience in advocacy and in service. And we are committed to human rights, peace, and security, as well as sustainable development. And in fact, we are the first multi-religious organization to have its leadership affirm gender equality and women's empowerment as a strategic priority and to align all of its objectives with the SDG agenda. So we are find this to be very relevant and obviously very important. We are also, wonderfully enough, the first multi-religious organization to be led by a woman, Professor Dr. Azza Karam, and she was elected to that position by its board. And one of our 6 key strategic priorities is sustainable environment, because we recognize the intimate connection between all forms of life and communities, and we are committed to nurturing a sustainable environment. And what we also recognize, and what I recognize personally, kind of what Neha and others spoke of, is kind of the moral responsibility and the spiritual responsibility. I am a mom of a 31-year-old, and my daughter is wonderful and very interested in conservation of animals and of the world. And so I see her, and I see the urgency in her actions and in her desire to serve and to work for a better world, because she's, they're unfortunately left with what is happening and what has been created. And so as I look at this, and as I look at the work that we're doing individually and collectively, this isn't really a choice. This is a responsibility. And we need to take this seriously. And we need to really grasp the enormity of it all, which is very difficult at the same time. I will speak about that a little bit later on. We have a wonderful partnership with an organization called the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative. And this organization provides a platform for religious leaders to work hand in hand with Indigenous peoples, governments, civil society organizations, and businesses on actions that protect rainforests and safeguard Indigenous peoples. It was founded in 2017, and it's a kind of a pioneering, if you will, approach that provides lessons on multi-faith collaboration, as well as bringing faith to environmental protection, which is very, very important. Their country programs are led by advisory councils, but we also make sure that within this mix, facilitated learning on the science that underpins the common spiritual, ethical, and moral commitment to end deforestation. So it's a collaborative effort. It's got a lot of people involved. Science and religion and faith do mix, and that's really important. And that is something that I appreciate, again, because we have been challenged by that notion of science and religion and how they have always clashed. In reality, they really can help us do our work better. One of the things that a lot of people don't really think about and recognize, which I also appreciate with the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, is that we focus on that protection of the rainforest is especially a human rights issue. Indigenous peoples are the historical guardians of rainforests, and in turn, they actually have almost 3/4 of their lands are facing grave threats. So it's their land, and yet it's not their land. And it's really, and if you think about it, and kind of what was talked about before, is all of the rainforest, it's a gift for all of us. It is essential to our life on Earth. The rainforest contains 50% of plant and animal species on the planet, provide hundreds of millions of people around the world with food, water, medicine, livelihoods. They are critical to our combating climate change. And we actually have a wonderful woman who actually works with us in this realm, Ms. Blanca Lucia Evacheri. She is a member of the Anglican Episcopal Church, and she is the founder of the Interreligious Council of Colombia, which was actually created originally to promote and transform the Colombian armed conflict from violence to reconciliation through dialogue. And as a human rights lawyer, she joined to be the coordinator of the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative in 2018. And with that, the UN Environment Program is involved. Religions for Peace obviously is involved. And she is leading this movement in Colombia. And for the first time in history of Colombia, religious communities are working together on interreligious initiatives that provide training. They do advocacy at the national and local level to influence public policy and action to protect the Amazon rainforest. And so there are women out there. And what I am finding is that unfortunately we just don't hear about them enough. B kind of, referred to that earlier, is that these women are out there, they have a platform, they have a voice. Unfortunately, they're drowned out, or we just don't hear about them. And so our work is to make sure that these women are heard. Blanca's work is actually serving as an inspiration for the development of this work further in Latin America, also in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in Indonesia, all places where the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative has launched country programs. So I just, again, just so appreciate being here and being able to have this important conversation because women really are a vital, vital role in this movement and in reaching a place where we will be able to sustain and live safely and comfortably on our planet. So thank you so much. Back to you, Steve.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Karen, for lifting up the moral responsibility that we all have, right? I think we're very much called to this work because of the enormity of our crisis. And women of leader also play this unique role in helping us be able to unpack this crisis in a way that helps us bring out this desire to serve, bring out this notion around equity and justice. You lifted up the great work that the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative is doing, and particularly thinking about how we often find in these situations that those least responsible are the most affected, right? And that's something that continuously echoes throughout these narratives, whether it's climate change, environmental protection, or those impacted by disasters. And so it's really encouraging to see women of faith really at the forefront of this work, continuing to drive action towards transforming this work, blending together faith and science, and beautifully so. And now I'll pass it over to Deborah to reflect with us. Same question: importance of women of faith in advancing the action for climate change, environmental protection, and DRR.
Thank you, Steve. And B, thank you so much to cover the whole range for the interfaith. And then Neha, interesting conversation from medical perspective, and Dr. Karen from Religions for Peace. All the sharing we talk about, and that's go back to our first presenter, Master De Ceng. The Tzu Chi Foundation's Buddhist, it's been in place to promote this kind of movement for quite some time. But be like you say, the final stage, we have to do document how we can bring all the interfaith, their contribution into the platform. That's a very important topic. For example, we talk about food system transformation. For Tzu Chi, from day one, we advocating plant-based diet. So I remember 2014 when we are in Peru for UNCCC, we promote no killing plant-based diet. At that time, no one really pay attention to it. They think about, what are you talking about plant-based diet? They just feel very comfortable. So from the food transformation from day one, no killing, no matter you are south-south or north-north, food, women bring the food on the table every day where we can find the food. So the best way now, we are not just emphasize for plant-based diet. We emphasize planting the food, planting the vegetable. So you empower women to give them know-how. We've been talking about so many things: climate justice, climate emergency, and then gender justice. But it's all go back to the fundamental food security. When we talk about food security, it's how to plan the food. So the food transformation is so critical. From plant-based diet, it's not just a slogan, it's going to be an action. By doing so, we need to mobilize the community, volunteer to support each others. So when they're planting the vegetable or planting the food, they need to have proper education. January is tomato, March is cabbage, and then June, July is cucumber. So that kind of information need to be available for them. And the most important, this kind of know-how technology is so simple into our daily life. So we need to empower the community leaders to make a change. Like Master De Ceng just shared, our founder, Master Zheng Yan, she used a paper 4 times, from pencil, from blue pen to red pen to calligraphy, and the water usage from rainwater, vegetable water, to become a toilet usage. So you know what? In Africa, Tzu Chi volunteers now because the climate situation in Sahara, in Mozambique, in Zimbabwe, there's such a challenge for a climate emergency, but they can grow vegetable in a whole desert. How can they do that? Because they started to understand building resiliency. They understand rather than waiting people to help me, how about I have the knowledge, I have the information to build it up a vegetable garden. From there, a lot of time we see the volunteer, the woman, especially the house key financial planners. They started to understand rather than every time I use one cabbage, I can use cabbage for 4 different styles, 4 different time. So they started to have the concept for recycling. In Zimbabwe, the volunteer go to the wholesale market. They have such a huge banana all the time because need to move the banana to the market. But some bananas are not such a good presentable. So the vendors throw it away. They pick up the banana and then to do banana, dry banana food and banana cake, banana juice. So they know how to recycle this kind of concept. The most important, change the lifestyle. So it's not just saying, rather than passive waiting, they started to change. How can I save something for the raining day? So the raining day is not just the regular one. They started implement the community well-being. So rather than has a strong Western style, that kind of desire, they started to thinking about how can I repair whatever people give to me? How should I reduce the desire? How can I reuse, recycle, and refuse the greed and anger? So a lot of concept, a lot of time, like this time UNEA, I saw in Europe, in Africa recently, the Build Back Better concept. This time I saw they use plastic to do a panel of the boat. Before, they never have that kind of creativity to get into the community to remind people. But now they use that. And who is doing that? Most of the time is woman. So woman has been in the silent supporter function for so long. When we talk about faith for the woman, faith in charge by the woman, when we talk about climate in DRR, we need to educate. We need to communicate. And now social media platform is so important. So when we talk about DRR, when we talk about climate justice, when we talk about food security, woman is the household in the charging position. And from there, we really need to think about the lifestyle is so simple. If you don't have that kind of strong desire, if you go back to your simple life, when you come to this world, you have nothing. You just have your 2 hands and your 2 legs. How can you survive? I always joking around. If I put the young generation now in Sierra Leone, compared to Sierra Leone's woman survive in the same jungle, the Western North woman compared to South woman, who can accomplish the survival skill. So woman empowerment is so critical. Know-how education is the way we need to use psychosocial capacity, use scientific, use faith in action to make the whole project move forward. Thank you so much. Back to you, Steve.
Thanks so much, Deborah. If you put me in Sierra Leone, you'd find me dehydrated on a beach and calling out for rescue. And thanks so much for lifting up this dire need for us to not only, because I think amongst us, we recognize and have consensus that women of faith are leaders within community and they can really create catalytic and transformative change. However, we must do the work to educate those in power and those in decision-making tables to recognize this catalytic transformation that can happen if they work together with women of faith to create this change, whether it's in climate action, environmental protection, or building resilience. And in turn, that'll kind of cascade into all of these great effects. And thinking about what it means to be self-reliant and to cultivate those environments so anyone can go from this cycle of dependency to this active cycle of empowerment to say, I, no matter my circumstance, can create my own local and hyper-local food system that not only can benefit myself, but really extend out to help more around us. And so with that, let's jump into the second question, thinking about all of this great work that has been shared and really coming back to Deborah's point about education, how can we really work together to promote the participation of women in faith in these conversations and actions? Because we know empirically that if we engage women of faith, that we will create better results. But there's challenges, there's roadblocks. I'd love to unpack that with you all. Let's start with Karen.
Great. Thank you again. This is just so wonderful to be part of this conversation. I believe and I have witnessed that women of faith are promoting their own participation in this conversation. And the other thing I believe is that they do not need anyone's permission to do so. And that's just super important because I kind of feel sometimes that, we're as women join this conversation and become more active, that it almost feels like they have to be careful, and they don't. They do not need anyone's permission to be a part of this conversation. As evidence from what I spoke about before, this is already occurring in places far and wide. And I think it feels as if women are being excluded, but in reality, as I said, they are there doing the work. Just like caring for the earth, including women of faith in these conversations is a responsibility. If women aren't included in this conversation, this is the problem. Including women in this conversation, again, isn't a choice. This is a must. The earth sustains us in every single way. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, the buildings we dwell in. Our relationship with the planet must be reciprocal. And a holistic understanding of where we are right now in regard to the planet is necessary, I believe, to empowering change. My doctoral project focused on restorative justice and interfaith peace building, and I had a whole section in my toolkit on restoring ourselves and restoring the earth. And what I realized as I was doing my project is the restoration of oneself leads to the transformation of oneself, and then that kind of goes out into the community around you. And the saying, hurt people, healed people, heal people. This is the same for the planet, in my opinion. Until we stop harming each other, we won't stop harming the planet. It is all very much interconnected. If we don't respect ourselves, then we can't respect the planet. When we're healed, we carry the intention of healing others as well as healing the earth. We hear every single day about how our climate is in peril, and it feels so overwhelming. And I believe that people are paralyzed by it. In my lifetime, it's been almost a norm to yet hear another animal making its way into extinction. Every year, there are massive wildfires as a native Californian, here in California, and now Australia has joined in this peril. I am currently residing in Southern California, and it is 90 degrees here today. It's not even April. Yesterday, it was 85, and a mountain lion actually wandered into a tech business in Irvine here in Southern California, and they think he was confused and he needed water due to the extreme temperatures. We see pictures of flooding in Bangladesh, yet there's a serious lack of potable water in India, which is creating water refugees. And what many people don't know, because the Syrian civil war has been happening for so long, 11 years now, is that the part of it was prompted out of a devastating drought that began in 2006, which forced many farmers to abandon their fields and migrate to the urban centers, which that migration is what helped fuel that civil war. And here we are again 11 years later. So we see all of this, we hear all of this, what can we do? And it's really difficult, depending on where you live, to not only recognize this, but to truly understand it. I think that we are disconnected. I think that as women of faith, you know, there's that concept and that idea that women are nurturers, and we are, and we are compassionate beings, and we raise our children, and we work to better our families, and we work to better our communities. And with that, I believe that all of us have this role. It's not just women of faith, it's all of us. As a Chicana, I am always very, very aware of my indigenous ancestral roots, and that my people are very attached to the land. My grandfather, who came over from Mexico in the early 1900s, was a farmer. He farmed in Mexico, he farmed here in America. And yet at the same time, I feel so disconnected from that part of who I am. And that was only just, you know, 2 generations. And so as I look at how women of faith and indigenous leaders are working together to create this deeper understanding of this reciprocal relationship that humans and animals are meant to have with the earth, they do recognize that the communities are struggling, and we need to bring all of our faith communities together to understand that. Again, for me, the question is more of why. Why do we not hear of these women's voices that they are participating already? And I go back to Religions for Peace and how our women leaders, our women of faith leaders, are doing this very well. They actually put out a statement for COP last year in 2021, and it was incredibly impactful. It starts with, we women of diverse faiths, beliefs, and traditions from different countries around the world hereby bring our collective voice to this COP. And I think that's what it is. It has to be that collective voice. Women are there. They are joining in these efforts. And I believe that, again, they don't need permission to be at the table. They just need to keep stepping up to that table that they are already partaking in. So I'll finish there. Thanks so much, Steve.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Karen. Within the word permission, there is the word mission as well, right? Like the mission supersedes permission. And if there isn't a seat at the table for you, we're making one and we're putting it there for us. I love that you're lifting up also the power of the collective and thinking about, like, we recognize that everyone's already doing the good work. How can we really reach out and connect everyone together to build that power so it becomes so immense to the point where those in leadership have to recognize, they're forced to recognize the value add that is coming to the table, right? And I think oftentimes what we can do as men and boys within spaces of privilege is trying to identify where these needs are, right? Like, what is the gap that people and particularly women leaders can speak to, and almost play like that, like sort of like, this is where we need insights, right? And I love all the reflections from there. I'll pass it over now to Deborah. Same question.
Thank you. Karen, you asked for why. I'm going to emphasize for how. Okay. This is a very interesting conversation. Why women's voices is not being heard so often. That's looking to how. We all know men and boy are dominant. They are always the voice speaker. People pay attention. But how are we going to engage them? I'm going to share, like Master De Cheng mentioned about these 8,000 environmental stations around the whole world, 127 countries. You know, those environmental stations every day some of them started 5 o'clock in the morning. Who started that? Women started. But later on, men joined to do the recycling station. They lifting the heavy stuff. So women started the small materials to separate the bottles, the clothes, the very lightweighted. But men started to disassemble the TVs, the 3C, those kind of materials. So you have to work with them together. So engage men and boy to be part of that. And the most important, a lot of time, recently in Southern California. Because of the climate situation, some of the country, they are really short of some of the clothing, some materials. So we all know, I hate to say women love to shop. We always have additional clothes in our closet. And then that kind of desire, we have to train ourselves to reduce our desire. But if you would like to reuse your clothing to help another community to repair or to continue carry out the materials life, so we have so-called thrifty store. So thrifty store, we engage the young generation. The kids coming in, they go to organize the clothing. You know, the conversation I've been overheard about the young generation talking about why people throw away such a nice clothes. If I have that kind of opportunity, I would never buy them. So you create a platform for the young generation to engage. So the how, H-O-W, how is we create a safe space for them to engage, to participate. So from the second used refurbished clothing and even the book, students go to the school, every single grade, they have different books. Those books, some of them used book, they can resell to the new student come to the campus. They can donate it to the library. The other thing is they can donate it to the country, the students, they need it. Until today, I still remember when I went to Sierra Leone, the students learning how to speak English. My mind always hear O-R-A-N-G-E, orange. They have no pencil, they have no paper, only recital. So this is the life, the simple life. We need to share what is the true life in the community, so-called developed, underdeveloped, and that kind of situation. So it's very, very critical for us how to engage, how to participate. So Tzu Chi, through the recycling stations, create a platform for all walks of life. No matter young generation, old generation, everyone has a capacity to engage. And they are doing the same thing day after day. They see people throw the trash. They turn the trash, separate them into a fully utilized materials. When do the process, when do the trash separation process, there's a medical component involved. There's a spiritual component involved. There is a behavior pattern involved. So that kind of environmental safety net environment is the way for how we're going to engage. And woman is the people behind the whole curtain to organize this way. The other one, we're talking about compost. Now, we are facing the food shortage around the globe. We cannot wait for people to provide food for us. We need to think about how to empower our life. Disaster risk reduction is not a slogan. It's happened to us. And we need to figure out how we can plant our own food, even though in the urban environment, even though in your small apartment. That kind of mitigation, adaptation concept need to be continued, emphasized. So the education, the workshop, the information through the social media, through the smartphone, through the TV stations, this kind of know-how education information through multinational language materials, we need to continue emphasize that. How to do that? It's just very simple. If the environment is reduce the desire, no competition, just a simple, frugal, happy moment. Then you feel contempt. You have a gratitude. Through the contentment and gratitude, you can respect all the living beings. Then we can make ourselves be prepared to face all the challenge. And woman is the people behind the whole sequence of delivery. We are the people. How we going to deliver the message? Through the compassion in action and serving with joy. That's a very critical moment for every one of us to continue to reflect and to think about and put into action. Back to you, Steve.
Thanks so much, Deborah. Creating an entire framework for us, right? Thinking about what it means to start with contentment and then take us from gratitude, respect, action, all the way out to resilience, right? And then also like really helping us almost launch into a third conversation around like, is materialism and the ultimate pursuit of accumulation the true goal of it all? And is there an alternative narrative? And how that conversation deeply aligns with this climate change conversation, right? Like, are we just going to continue to burn fossil fuels for all of eternity in the name of progress? Or is there something better that awaits us? And with that, maybe I'll pass it over to B to reflect with us. Same question. How can we really promote the participation of women of faith? Because they have such important insights and nuggets of wisdom like Deborah was just sharing. How do we make it happen?
I mean, the panel has put this so eloquently, and I really hope I can do justice and not, not repeat too much of what's being said. But I mean, it's, I fully am humbled by and really respect these different opinions that are coming, because it's so important. It's not just one solution, right? And I think this empowered and this wisdom that's coming through today on this panel, it's so critical that we take note of that, because I really feel like this is part of that change that needs to really take place. And so, in addressing your question on how we can work together, I think, again, the inclusion of women of faith in such a conversation, as has been said before, cannot be done in a silo, right? It is part and parcel of a broader issue, the issue of the inclusion of the voices of women in any and all aspects that impact them. Climate change is one of those, but it is not an issue that is also in silo. We've talked about food insecurity, we've talked about poverty, we've talked about so many other aspects. So the inclusion of their voices, and they definitely don't need any permission, 100% agree. But there needs to be a system within which their voices have more volume, And I'm slightly repeating a point that I made earlier, where we know women are disproportionately impacted by climate change. We know they face social and economic and political barriers that worsen their vulnerability to climate shocks, right? And their ability to adapt to the climate change. We also know that in the past 2 decades, the potential role that social protection can play in addressing these gendered risks and vulnerabilities and inequalities has gone up. And in a way, that's also, to Deborah's point about the how. So the solution that potentially we want to present today is these well-designed social protection interventions that empower women, girls, and communities to adapt to climate change and to accelerate the transition towards a green economy. And influencing the community at the community level, and having a dialogue where the inclusion of women of faith is particularly crucial, right? So as an international community, what do we need to do? We must do better to make sure that these voices are heard, that we are addressing the recommendations that they have for us. And this includes creating opportunities for women and women of faith, all women, like from different tiers of community, just that they need to participate in policy making. They need to discuss and share their views about climate change. But it also means that within the faith space, more women leaders have a voice. And so that is an accountability and something that we need to strive towards. There needs to be equality across the spectrum within our society to enable this change to happen. We must also work harder with public and private sector partners to strengthen social protection systems. Whether it's responding to disasters or adapting for a greener future, girls, boys, families, communities, everyone needs a stronger social protection system now more than they ever did, because any process at a community level cannot be successfully addressed without a system in place. And as part of that system, including the voices of religious leaders, men and women, is again a very critical component. What we know, though, is that social protection systems are often underinvested, they are gender blind, they leave people highly vulnerable in crisis. And the need for strong climate resilient social protection system is more important now than ever before. And so the key takeaway is that we need to see the importance of building coalitions of people and organizations to offer a different vision for the world, and then push to make it a reality. So the changes we need on climate change and gender equality in and out of the faith spectrum are not only entirely possible, but they are the only path to a just world. They are urgent, they're critical, and they are in everyone's fundamental interest in the long run. I mean, to participate more meaningfully, to adapt in the face of climate crisis and to respond to disaster, whatever disaster hits, we want young people, girls, women, religious and community leaders to have a central role in this discussion. And I think this is I think the nutshell is that social protection is really the critical tool in this broader toolkit to support resilience, to tackle poverty, and to shift norms and power. And yes, I mean, I think the last thing I would say is that we know, and I'm repeating myself, but we know that including women in positions of power and decision making leads to better decision, it leads to better investment, and it leads to better outcomes. And how can we proceed without wanting to have that? So over.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, B. I think coming in hard on social protections, and it really is this beautiful mechanism that ensures that no matter who we aren't at risk of being left behind, right? And I'm very thankful that you also lifted up the need for it to be climate resilient, right? And thinking about how we can invest more deeply. And maybe perhaps it's a two-way street, right? Not only is it that social protection systems must be created and invested in order to empower women of faith to become more meaningfully engaged at a community level, but that also women of faith can also create their own social protection systems, like we've seen done in de facto villages, where women are supporting other women and utilizing those models and systems to fill in the gaps before the official mechanisms take place. And I love that you're lifting up also thinking about strategically where can we ensure that our voices are the most loudest heard or have the most volume and that they have the deepest impact. Because at the end of the day, participation alone is not enough. It has to be meaningful and transformative. And so thanks for lifting up all of those great points. I'll now pass it over to Neha.
I should mic drop right here because you guys have already said it all really and said it so beautifully. I can't take credit for it. I just have a few thoughts because we've asked a lot of questions in terms of what we need. Social protection systems certainly seems like a key and core piece of what we need. And the question for me, and since I'm adding to the questions we've already asked, as a health professional, we see that people change. There are very sort of interesting slices of times when people change behavior. And it's sort of the why. Why do I need to engage in these things? Why would I do this thing that I know is going to be potentially helpful in the long term, but may not be so useful in the short term when I'm in a crisis state or I have a lot of other concerns that are going on. So the why, I think, is very interesting to me. And that's where I always come back to these religious traditions for two words, legacy and identity. I think we change behavior when we identify ourselves, we label ourselves as something. So, an easy example, you smoke, I'm trying to quit smoking is one identity. I quit smoking is another identity. I now identify myself as someone who is partaking in a certain behavior. And then for a lot of us, that identity comes from this religious legacy. For my children, I have 3 mini goddesses in my house. And for them, I really try to think about why we need to behave in a certain way because I'm trying to pass on their inheritance, their 5,000-year-old legacy for how we once lived in harmony, or, we were probably never perfect. So this is all sort of, some myths that we've created in our own minds. But there was a time when central to the core of how we lived was you wake up, you look at your hands, you see the divine in your hands, you take a step, you step on Mother Earth, you pray to Mother Earth to protect you and to forgive you for all the steps that you're taking on her. You go outside, you pray to the sun god. There's just so much. You eat a wholesome meal, you do exercises, you breathe in, you breathe out. This is all sort of a system of life that is their legacy. And so that becomes the why we need to partake in these behaviors. The how, I think, is where women come into play. So how do we do it is to really engage in women who are the ones who, I think I mentioned this before, and we've all said this, is that we in the home, we in our personal lives, and we in our communities are often the ones that are guiding these decisions. We are guiding the decisions of what we're putting into our children's mouths. Now, if I'm in a crisis state, and I have been there with 3 kids and they're screaming, maybe I will pop a candy into one of their mouths. But really, we are trying to focus on the healthy, nutritious, whole food, plant-based diet, because I know that in the long run, that is going to be a healthy behavior for my children and my community to participate in. And then that ripples into a virtuous cycle. So instead of spiraling down, we're spiraling up into a food system that supports that and is not a polluting, high emissions food system. If we're going to school and I say today we're going to walk to school rather than taking the car, now I'm doing, I'm multi-solving for health and for local pollution. The same way, if I am part of a religious community that becomes a resilience hub because these are usually large spaces, can this resilience hub serve as a cooling center in times of crisis? Can it serve as a water station when people are suffering from drought communities? So, there's a lot of ways that we become the how as women, but we can't make the behavior change unless we have identified the why we need to do that. So I think that those are some of the key things. And then I'll just end with a point about eco-anxiety. And I think, again, here, our faith traditions can help us, where, we see more and more literature, we see more and more reality that not just our children, but all of us are suffering from the anxiety for the things that we're seeing around us and not knowing that our actions are going to be enough. But again, this is where our religious traditions, again, tell us, this is why I can't identify with the term women of faith, but women of action. I do not have any ability to control what the outcome is, whether I'm fearful of the outcome, whether I'm hopeful for an outcome, there will be an outcome. All that I can control is the action that I am doing today, the action that I'm teaching my children to do, to identify with themselves and to sort of create and extend this legacy. So I will stop there.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Neha. Oh my goodness. Thinking about just identity as a key driver to create this behavioral change, such a fantastic linkage back to then also our religious values and teachings, and thinking about how we take all of these things and create these virtuous cycles that will then amplify not only in our own personal lives, but outwards and onwards into our community and so on and so forth. And finally, coming back to this idea of how with eco-anxiety also is paired with the healing that comes from our faith traditions, right? We don't just hold faith and sit there without doing anything. We really take action. And so to all my women in action, we're now going to jump into the next portion, which is our Q&A. So we have one question that I want to lift up from the audience, but then I also want to hold space for everyone to kind of be able to respond to each other and also continue this conversation. So I'll pull two questions and then I'll leave the space for anyone to jump in. The first question comes from our audience, which is really asking this question about this slowly encroachment on culture to influencing our own decision making and what we think is correct, right? So the question goes, there are so many factors out there that lure people to a better instead of simple life, which means spending more, living a comfortable life. How do faith groups work against the tide? And I think to this extent that we kind of touched on this in this narrative around like what it means to lead a like a life in alignment with addressing climate change, whereby instead of pursuing materialism, we're looking at how we build connectivity and community. But I'd love to hear, do you guys have any strategies on that front in terms of how do religious leaders and religious communities help us stave away from hyper materialism and reconnect with what we know to be inherently good? So that's question number one. Okay, hold that question. Question number two, for those who don't want to jump into that, I have a second follow-up just based on all of this conversation, and Neha kind of like kick-started us into this discussion as well. And I'd love to explore this with you as well, in that I think as we advocate, as we take action at a local level, as we build community, really all of this, what lies at the heart of all of this work is mindset transformation. And I'd love to hear if you have any strategies beyond what has already been shared, which is a bountiful amount of resources. What strategies come forth that help us transform the mindsets of those who are resistant to change, resistance to discomfort, right? And are set in their ways, right? Because what we've seen at Tsuji is when we talk about like changing our food systems to become more plant-centered, to become more plant-based, there's many oppositions to that, whether that's cultural, whether that's individual identity-based, or that may be because they themselves don't know how to cook the work, right? And so the transition will occur whether or not we wish for it to occur, but how do we ensure it's equitable, just, and helping those who are making this transition? So I'll pause that space, open it up. Who wants to jump in?
Okay, you want me to jump in? Okay.
Please.
Well, I kind of feel like both questions definitely complement each other. For me, with my theologian hat on right now, I feel that instead of faith groups working against the tide, we need to work with the tide. Because again, we have that resistance. We have people who are not willing to kind of give in, if you will, and that's frustrating for many of us. We saw this with COVID, and we still see it with COVID, right? Mask wearing, things like that. All of these things. I think for me personally, and I'm kind of a shoot for the hip, right between the eyes type of person, is the reality is that people are dying. People are dying because our earth is not healthy. And that may be way over there somewhere, that these things are happening. And it can be very overwhelming. We have all of these things that we need and we want and we desire, such as my phone, right? My phone, these parts come from the DRC, which in turn is using children as slave labor, which in turn is degrading the environment in the DRC. And I actually have a very good friend, Father Francis Makosi, back about 5 years, 6 years ago, who was actually assassinated because he was advocating for the rights of children in the DRC who were mining for our phones, and people went after him and killed him. And yet I still use my phone. Okay. And so the inconvenience of working against this is really difficult. Do I give up my phone? Do I give up my computer? Do I give up driving? Do I, I don't eat meat. And so I think it's a choice, and I think we have to work with it and find solutions that allow us to recognize the reality that there is no planet B. There is no planet B. This is it. This is all we've got. And so I'll kind of stop there. I could go on, but I feel like we have to give and take in this situation.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Karen. Neha.
Sure. I think that was a wonderful way to think about it. I think when we think about public health messaging, and we did not get it perfectly right with COVID, and I think there are a lot of lessons learned. It's that it's easy, simple messages that are repeated often and often. And I think that it has to be, and the action has to be easy, accessible, and socially accepted. So how do we create a situation where people find it socially acceptable to do these things, and that it's fun and easy to do it? Because no one is going to change their behavior if it's more difficult, more expensive. There's not a clear sort of connection between the dots between what they need to do and why they need to do it. So I think that potentially a harms reduction approach here, it can be helpful. We do that a lot in medicine, that you may not potentially get to that perfect spot. And I think that sometimes people fearing judgment, that they either are doing X behavior or they're not doing X behavior, there's this potential judgment attached to it, which unfortunately limits people's ability to change. So if we do approach it with a harms reduction approach, which is, in the office, it would be, okay, what is it motivational interviewing wise? What is it that you can do? Why do you want to do it? And now let's come up with a very specific plan. So you can't give up meat, but can you eat meat just three times a week? What can we do? What are some of these simple ways that we can change it? Can you be part of a social challenge where it's fun for you to do this? You don't like to walk to school, but can you go with a group of kids? Is that fun for you to go with? Then you get social connection. So it's really thinking about how do we reduce the harm. I think that can be helpful.
Steve, shall I go next?
All you, B.
I mean, again, it's very difficult to follow Neha and Karen, but so I mean, I think if we take a step back and we look at trying to have like a positive social behavior change, right? So I mean, the example that was used was materialism, and I feel if you go back and you look at any faith, old, new. There is no faith that's going to tell you to be selfish. There's no faith that's going to tell you to overhoard, right? So the crux of this is the morality of, if you look at being a good human, being a good person of faith, however you want to say it, I think, if we go back to our common space, it is the same. The messages are very humane, they're very same, and they're very simple. And I think that, to Neha's point about making a message simple, easier to absorb, easier to relate to, I think that's what we need to do. And I feel like with certain issues, when you tackle them from a space of faith, I think it's usually easier to find a place of commonality, right? And I think that's why this interfaith space is so critically important. And when you look at, we can have a whole conversation about mindset transformation and positive behavior change, but just to say that, to that point that was being made about fearing judgment, and this is not related to climate, but it's related to harmful practices. So when I was working in Sudan, the issue of female genital mutilation was a huge one. And it is linked with culture, and it was linked with the Islamic faith. And we realized that to change social norms, and something that is perhaps I say definitely incorrectly steeped in what you think is a religious thought process, there were still ways to bring change about it. Why? Because you found the do no harm principle, and then you educated yourself and you looked at, what does your faith tell you? Really, what is it telling you? Trying to find your champions, your religious leaders, who are able to tell you technically how to speak and how to engage. And you see that bringing together female heads of the communities, bringing together religious leaders, bringing together experts, health experts, it basically made it into a simple message that people did not have to fear judgment, thinking that maybe they were being bad Muslims, but actually telling you, no, this is the message, this is what the teachings say, this is what health is telling you, this is what you need to do to overcome this. And so I think it was, again, taking a complex issue, simplifying it, and presenting it. And I think that has had a lot of success in changing how the number of cases that we've had of FGM in Sudan.
Steve, I'm going to follow up with B's input. It's very important how we bring the whole issue on the table. When we face the reality, like Karen and Neha just say, if we can stop ourselves at that moment, as a woman of faith, let's stop right there. And then let's look around what's happened. And then from there, we can hear our consciousness. Our consciousness will leading to the wisdom for us to face the reality. So no matter it's social protection systems or it's a legacy or it's a woman in action, it's really so simple. It's from your heart. How are we going to reduce our desire? How are we going to put into actions? It's all from your heart and your mind. So that kind of stop ourselves, look around the community and hear from our heart. That will be the way for every one of us to reduce our desire and think about materialism and think about Mother Earth is suffering. So back to you.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, everyone, for those wonderful reflections. And I know Q&A was so short, and this conversation is such an expansive one that we could go on forever. But unfortunately, we're at the last 5 minutes, so I'm going to invite all of our speakers to share with us a final call out. 1 minute each of just closing messages, your own thoughts. We've really gone across the spectrum, right? And at the end of the day, what we can all have consensus on is that engaging and empowering women of faith is one of the key drivers to ensuring that we can take transformative action towards ensuring that we address the climate crisis and safeguard the natural world and ensure that we are resilient to disasters. And so with this, I'd like to invite Venerable De Ten to provide her reflections to us, and then we'll go down the line.
Thank you, Steve, for giving me this time. And thank you all panelists for your wonderful contributions. From the discussion today, we have learned extensively about the work of the different organizations in taking action toward climate neutrality. Especially impressed that all the panelists mentioned that, to the point, we are all people of action based on our own religion values and different kinds of traditions. Just like the Dr. Karen says that this is responsibility. We need to take it very seriously and work by hand with hand. And totally agreed what Deborah says that we need to reduce our desires and wants, and also the women empowerment, educational farming knowledge, and social protection systems are truly crucial for us to continue to make more efforts altogether. And I believe that the faith leaders have a key role to play in promoting not only actions, but also transformation of mindsets. The foundation of environmental protection is compassion. To overcome the environmental challenges of our times, it is not enough that we have compassion only for those close to us. Our love must be all-encompassing, including all people, animals, plant life, or even the oceans, rivers, rainforests, of course, and the earth itself. If we can hold such compassion in our hearts at all times, naturally we will take action to minimize the footprint on this earth. Let us all come together to extend our love and take action every day at every moment.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Venerable De Ten. I'll now invite Karen, closing remarks.
Yes, thank you again so much. So much wisdom, so many talking points. I think what I would like to just finish with is in regard to women of faith, in regard to faith communities, the golden rule, do to others what you would do unto them, it is present in every faith tradition across the planet. Every faith tradition, even including humanism. And so with that, that for me is kind of a driving force, and also recognizing again that women of faith are out there, they are doing this work, they are marginalized. So more than anything, what I call upon is a multi-collaborative effort that involves everything. We've heard about policy, we've heard about government actors, we've heard about other non-governmental organizations, we've heard about all of the things that we have spoken about, and it is a holistic model, and we do have to work together. And with that, one of the most important things, especially with women of faith, especially with the girl child, especially with our young women, is we need to listen. We need to listen, and we need to care. And it's not easy, but I feel that we are at a nexus right now where it's imperative. So thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thanks, Karen. B, over to you.
Thank you. And just I 100% supporting everything that Karen has said. I think for me, the key takeaways and the next steps is first acknowledging that there's a lot of knowledge and expertise that exists. So we need to really hone in on that, collect that evidence, pull it together, work together. Our approach needs to be united. It needs to be joint, and it needs to be consistent. It cannot be ad hoc moments of coming together. It needs to be consistently ongoing. We cannot afford to operate in these silos of climate or faith or gender or a food insecurity, or it needs to come together. And I think we really need to elbow this way into this space to bring that to the highlight. And I think really as an agency that is not an expert on faith, right? The fact that strengthening partnerships really needs to be at the crux of this, because there is expertise out there, and we can all help each other power through this. And I think it would be amiss if we don't work together on this. So I think partnerships is the way forward. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks, B. Over to you, Deborah.
Besides B and Karen mentioned, I want to emphasize is assertive. Women need to have that kind of assertive attitude. We all understand we cannot be siloed. We all understand we need to have a partnership. We all understand we need to unite it into one voices. But the assertive attitude and mentality is such a critical moment for sustainability. The old generation, the young generation, now we all need to work together to look into what will be the best approach, what will be the best practice to bring everybody to the same direction, climate neutrality. The biodiversity is right there, but we need to be assertive. We have directions, but the methodology need to be working together to heading to the same directions. Back to you, Steve.
Beautiful. Thanks, Deborah. I'll pass it over to Neha.
Thank you all so much. Again, just adding a few thoughts to what has already been said is that there is obviously an ideal state that we want to all get to, and we all want to get to it together, but there is a current state. And we have people that have a huge range of where they are in terms of their understanding of the crisis and in terms of their understanding of what they need to do to help us get to the ideal state. So I think that really ensuring that people understand the urgency of why we need to act, it's not necessarily that we all will get there at some point, it's that there's urgent action that's necessary now, and how do we work together as partners without redundancy. So we don't really have time for redundancy right now. We all need to work in the ways that we can, in the communities that we work with together, to move and shift towards that ideal state as quickly as possible.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Neha. And thank you to all of our panelists for really coming together with us today and sharing such deep reflections and wisdoms along all of the areas of work that you're doing. We recognize that this really is a journey. And on this journey, we're deeply grateful that to all of you as speakers and our audience for joining us along this path. I hope that every one of you has found inspiration for more collaborative action, deeper insights and wisdoms into how we can strengthen our impact and ensure that along this road towards climate neutrality, that we are able to empower and engage those who are truly creating the change we wish to see in this world. We're deeply thankful for all of our partners for co-organizing this with us, and we'd also like to invite you to our second CSW session that's happening tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern. We're going to be exploring the nexus, another important nexus of food systems, gender equity, and the role that different organizations are playing in this space. And so we'd love to have you at that as well. And so with that, I'd like to close out with just deep, deep gratitude to all of you for being here with us today. This really is a journey. We're on this path together, and you can count on Tsuji as partners along this work as we move forward to create a more sustainable future together. Thank you so much. Bye bye, guys.